Past perfect continuous. Function of the past perfect continuous. The past perfect continuous corresponds to the present perfect continuous, but with reference to a time earlier than before now. As with the present perfect continuous, we are more interested in the process. Examples. Had you been waiting long before the taxi arrived? We had been trying to open the door for 5 minutes when Jane found her key. It had been raining hard for several hours, and the streets were very wet. Her friends had been thinking of calling the police when she walked in. This form is also used in reported speech. It is the equivalent of the past continuous and the present perfect continuous in direct speech. Jane said, "I have been gardening all afternoon." Jane said that she had been gardening all afternoon. When the police questioned him, John said, "I was working late in the office that night." When the police questioned him, John told them he had been working late in the office that night. Forming the past perfect continuous. The past perfect continuous is composed of two elements: the past perfect of the verb to be, had been, plus present participle, base plus ing. Subject, had been, verb plus ing. Positive, I had been walking. She had been trying. Negative, she hadn't been sleeping. Interrogative, had you been eating? Interrogative negative, hadn't they been leaving? Verb to buy in past perfect continuous. Positive, I had been buying. You had been buying. She had been buying. We had been buying. They had been buying. Negative, I hadn't been buying. You hadn't been buying. She hadn't been buying. We hadn't been buying. They hadn't been buying. Interrogative, had I been buying? Had you been buying? Had she been buying? Had we been buying? Had they been buying? Some more examples. When the boys came into the house, their clothes were dirty, their hair was untidy, and one of them had a black eye. They had been fighting. I was very tired when I arrived home. I had been working all the day. You can say that something had been happening for a period of time before something else happened. Our game of tennis was interrupted. We had been playing for about half an hour when it started to rain very heavily. Ken gave up smoking 2 years ago. He had been smoking for 30 years. Had been plus ing, past perfect continuous, is the past of have been plus ing, present perfect continuous. Look at the table. Present perfect continuous. I hope the bus comes soon. I have been waiting for 20 minutes. Before now. He is out of breath. He has been running. Past perfect continuous. At last the bus came. I had been waiting for 20 minutes. Before the bus came. He was out of breath. He had been running. Compare had been doing and was doing. Past continuous. It wasn't raining when we went out. The sun was shining, but it had been raining, so the ground was wet. Anne was sitting in an armchair watching television. She was tired because she had been working very hard. Some verbs, for example, know and want, and others, are not normally used in the continuous. We were good friends. We had known each other for years. Not had been knowing. Use. The past perfect continuous is used to talk about actions or situations that were in progress before some other actions or situations. There are also other uses. 1. Duration of a past action up to a certain point in the past. 2. Showing cause of an action or situation. 3. Third conditional sentences. 4. Reported speech. Use 1. Duration of a past action. The main use of the past perfect continuous is to express action or situation that were in progress before some other action or situation. The boys had been quarreling for half an hour when we arrived home. I had been dating Angelina for 3 years before we got married. Use 2. Showing cause. Use this tense to show cause of an action or situation in the past. John was in a detention because he had been misbehaving. The road was wet because it had been raining. I had to go on a diet because I had been eating too much sugar. Jessica got sunburn because she had been lying in the sun too long. Use 3. Third conditional. Remember that this tense is also used in the third conditional sentences. If it hadn't been raining, we would have gone to the park. Use 4. Reported speech. This tense also appears in reported speech. She said she knew Charlie had been lying to her. We use the past perfect continuous to look back at a situation in progress. It was a good time to invest. Inflation had been falling for several months. Before I changed jobs, I had been working on a plan to reduce production costs. We had been thinking about buying a new house, but then we decided to stay here. We use it to say what had been happening before something else happened. It had been snowing for a while before we left. We had been playing tennis for only a few minutes when it started raining. He was out of breath when he arrived because he had been running. We use it when reporting things said in the past. She said she had been trying to call me all day. They said they had been shopping. I told you I had been looking for some new clothes. Now let's get down to practice. Positive. Ben had been working for 3 hours when Rachel came home. By the time Sam found an umbrella, it had been raining for 10 minutes. By the time Catherine got to the office, the client had been waiting for an hour. The client had been waiting for an hour by the time Catherine got to the office. I had been feeding the dogs when I tripped and fell. Negative. I hadn't been feeling well, so I sent him away. Simon hadn't been expecting a positive answer when he got a job. The hikers hadn't been walking long before they got lost. Yes, no questions. Had he been drinking when you found him? Had the manager been complaining about Jim before she fired him? Hadn't the snow been falling for hours before then? With questions. What had you been doing when you cut your finger? Which fax had you been trying to send when the power went off? How long had he been waiting? Now let's have some trial test. You have to choose right answer. Seville woke up in the middle of the night. She was frightened and didn't know where she was. She A. was dreaming, B. has been dreaming, C. had been dreaming, D. had dreaming, E. is dreaming.